I used to think that the most dangerous thing in a marriage was a sudden, violent storm, a singular event that could tear the roof off your life in an instant. But I was wrong. The most dangerous thing is the slow, silent accumulation of frost. I was Tom, a man who believed his life was a masterpiece of stability. For over a decade, Anna and I had built a world that felt solid, a fortress against the chaos of the outside world. We had our rituals, our inside jokes, and a history that felt like a heavy, warm blanket. We were the couple that our friends relied on, the ones who had figured it out. But as I stand here today, picking through the debris, I realized that I was living in a house of glass, and the cracks had been spreading for years before I finally heard the sound of the shattering dot. The trouble didn't start with a scream. It started with a shift in the light. It was the way Anna's gaze would linger on the horizon during our evening walks, her mind clearly inhabiting a space I wasn't invited to enter. It was the way her laughter, once a spontaneous and messy thing, became a curated performance, perfectly timed but hollow, like a recording played in an empty room. I felt the temperature in our home drop by fractions of a degree every single week. Her phone, which used to be just a tool, became a vault. She began to carry it with her from room to room as if it contained her very breath. I watched her thumb dance across the screen in the middle of the night, the blue light reflecting in her eyes, making her look like a stranger. I told myself it was just work, or the stress of the city, or a phase we were passing through. I chose to believe in the safety of our history rather than the evidence of my own gut. I was a man who preferred a comfortable lie to a devastating truth. The discovery was a moment of total, silent disintegration. It was a Tuesday, a day so ordinary, so aggressively mundane, that it felt like an insult to the catastrophe it held. Anna had left for a yoga class, leaving her laptop open on the kitchen island. I only intended to close a tab, to save the battery, but the universe had decided my time in the dark was over. A notification chimed, then another. The name Oleg appeared on the screen, a name that carried no weight in my memory, but would soon become the heavy anchor of my ruin. I sat there, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house, as I scrolled through a year of their history. It was a roadmap of a secret life. She had shared our intimate jokes with him. She had sent him photos of the garden, had spent all summer planting, but she had framed them so I wasn't in the picture. The betrayal wasn't just in the physical acts they described. It was the psychological theft. Every "I love you" she had said to me while texting him under the dinner table was a brick removed from our foundation. I realized then that I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a background character in her real story. When the front door finally clicked open and Anna walked in, smelling of lavender and the outdoors, I didn't have the energy for fire. I didn't want to break the plates we had bought on our honeymoon or scream until my throat was raw. I simply sat at the table and turned the screen toward her. I watched her face undergo a terrifying, high-speed transformation from the casual ease of a wife coming home to the sharp, brittle coldness of a cornered architect. There were no tears of immediate regret. Instead, she began to build a wall of words. She spoke of her own needs and suffocation as if they were natural disasters I had caused. She framed her betrayal a necessary escape, a way to reclaim a version of herself that I had supposedly buried under the weight of our domesticity. Listening to her justify the destruction of our 12 years together was like watching a stranger wear my wife's clothes. She wasn't mourning the loss of us. She was mourning the fact that her shadow life had been dragged into the sun. The emotional impact was a slow-motion drowning. For months, I lived in a state of sensory overload. Everything in our house was a trigger. The smell of her shampoo, the way the sunlight hit the rug at 4 p.m., the sound of her key in the lock, it all felt like a physical assault. The shock was a heavy, numbing fog that made the simplest tasks, like buying groceries or answering an email, feel like climbing a mountain in a blizzard. Then came the rage, a hot, pulsing fire that made me want to erase every trace of her from the world. I wanted to shred our wedding photos and burn the letters she had written me. But even the rage eventually grew tired, leaving behind a vast, echoing sadness. I realized I wasn't just grieving for a wife. I was grieving for the man I used to be, the man who believed that love was a shield. Acceptance didn't come as a relief. It came as a cold, hard fact. It was the realization that the woman I loved hadn't just made a mistake. She had made a choice. Every single day, for a year, the decision to move forward was the most difficult thing I have ever had to build. For a long time, I wrestled with the idea of reconciliation. We went to the therapy sessions, the ones where you sit on a sofa and try to find a pulse in a corpse. But I realized that every time she touched my arm, I was looking for the shadow of Oleg. Every time she said she was sorry, I wondered which part of the story she was still hiding. I realized that to stay would be to live in a state of perpetual hypervigilance, forever checking the locks on doors that had already been kicked in. I decided that my own peace was worth more than the preservation of a ruin. The resolution was a quiet, systematic dismantling of our life. I packed 12 years into cardboard boxes. It is amazing how small a marriage looks when it's stacked in the back of a moving truck. I moved into a small apartment where the walls were bare and the silence was finally my own. It was a terrifying freedom, but it was honest. Looking back from the vantage point of a hard-won peace, I can see the lessons clearly now. I learned that trust is not a gift you give to someone else. It is a boundary you set for yourself. I learned that you can never truly know the internal weather of another person's soul, no matter how close you think you are. My advice to anyone standing in the ruins of their own life is this: do not try to glue the shards of a broken mirror back together just because you're afraid of the sharp edges. The person who broke the trust is rarely the one who can help you find your way back to yourself. Healing happens in the quiet spaces where you stop asking why and start asking what now. I am no longer the Tom who lives in a house of certainty. I am a man who has learned to build his own foundation, stone by stone, in the silence. I am building something new now, a life that isn't a fortress, but a home that is finally, painfully, and beautifully real. The recovery wasn't linear. There were days, even a year later, when I would catch a scent or hear a song and be transported back to that kitchen island, feeling the same cold dread as if it were happening for the first time. But those moments grew further apart. I started to rediscover the things that Anna hadn't liked, the music I had stopped playing, the hobbies I had set aside to make room for her. I realized that in trying to be the perfect husband for her, I had become a stranger to myself. The betrayal was an ending, yes, but it was also a brutal, and asked for liberation. I began to inhabit my own life again. I learned to appreciate the quiet of a Saturday morning and the simple honesty of a blank calendar. I am not the same man I was, and I never will be again. I am scarred, and I am more cautious, but I am also more present. I have stopped building houses out of glass. My new life is made of something much humbler, but much stronger. It is made of the truth